Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody, to this Yale Ciencia Academy Conversations with Scientists. Today, we are going to be discussing non-research careers. And so I will introduce our panelists for today. First up, we have Dr. César Berríos-Otero. César, why don't you say hi?
Hello, everyone. How's everybody doing? Please don't answer all at once.
So César is the Director of Outreach for Faculty of 1000, publisher of 3 unique services that support and inform the work of life scientists and clinicians. We also have Dr. Rudy Bellani. I don't think he's yet with us. He said that he was going to be a little late, but I will introduce him nevertheless. Rudy is the co-founder and CEO of Oyster, a company that's dedicated to helping PhDs find non-academic jobs at no cost to them. And last but not least, we have our very own Dr. Giovanna Guerrero-Medina. She is the Executive Director of Ciencia Puerto Rico, an international network of scientists, students, and educators committed to promoting scientific outreach, education, and careers among Latinos. She's also the director of the Yale Ciencia Initiative at Yale University, where she studies the impact of scientific networks like Ciencia Puerto Rico in improving access and participation in science, and works to promote diversity through the Yale Provost Office. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. So I will start, since our panelists, they're all in non-research, non-academic careers, but they're in such diverse positions. I will ask them to start by telling us a little bit about how they got there, and what were the motivations for them to switch out of research and out of academia into what they do now. And I'll have you start, César.
Okay, so let's go back. Actually, let's go way back. I think, I don't know if the bio is up. If it's not, you may get to read it later on. So ever since I was a kid, I was always fascinated by, I guess, nature documentaries and whatnot. And one of my heroes has always been Jacques Cousteau, very famous oceanographer, and specialized in outreach for marine biology outreach. So I guess, like, from the very, very beginning, outreach was something that had interested me, but I wasn't entirely sure on how to go about it. Nevertheless, I went into science. I got my bachelor's in biology at the University of Puerto Rico. I started my PhD at NYU. And it was here where I first got a taste of outreach, by going with the program director to Puerto Rico to try to recruit students for the graduate program at NYU, at the NYU Sackler program for biomedical sciences. So I did that for a couple of years, and right there and then I realized that is precisely what I wanted to do as a career. I never actually thought you could get paid for doing that, so it was actually pretty exciting to find out that you could. However, by the time around the time that I was graduating, the real estate bubble burst and whatnot, and the economy kind of crashed for a bit. So people, there was a dearth of jobs, and I was advised that, if I wanted to do outreach, if I wanted to work in a similar field, that I should nonetheless try and do a postdoc. So I did a postdoc for a couple of years at Mount Sinai. And while I was doing my postdoc, I made sure that I, networked as much as I could. And I was being pushed by a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine. He's actually going to be my best man at my wedding. He actually pushed me to go to as many networking events as I could in the city, meet as many people as I could, and to get a feel of what was out there in terms of jobs for scientists or former scientists. And it was actually one of these events that I met another outreach director for Faculty of 1000. Her name is Kinga Hosu. You might have met her at some of your universities. She has definitely visited institutes here in the U.S. And I might have met some of you in Puerto Rico. I've done a couple of events over there as well. So went to this event, started talking to her, and got a feel for what she did. And she mentioned that there was a position in the company, and that I might be a good fit for it. So a couple of weeks later, shoot her an email, meet with her at a Starbucks around the corner from where she worked, chatted for about an hour and a half. And a couple of days later, I get a call from the company. The managing director of the company here in the U.S. interviewed and pretty much got the offer right there and then. Actually, a couple hours later, met with. Then I had a call with the CEO of the company, and I got offered the job, and the rest is history. So that's kind of in a nutshell how I got where I am, how I started in outreach. Yeah, so I'm open to any questions that you might have in terms of how I got here as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Actually, I have a follow-up question. Can you tell us what it means in your position, what it means to do outreach?
That's great.
Yes. I think there's different definitions for outreach. So can you tell us a little briefly about what it means to do outreach for you?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. Outreach for me, in my position, is kind of a marketing role, per se. So I am the person that's going out there and giving presentations at the universities that already subscribe to our products, pretty much showcasing how scientists can use our products, where in their workflow they can use each one of the products. Talking to them about the type of science that we publish, talking to them about the different services. I'm also there at scientific meetings at the booth, answering questions, doing demos. So pretty much talking from 9 in the morning till 5 all day throughout the whole conference. I also get invited to universities to talk about, career talks, obviously, but other topics related to publishing, be it, what it means to, what is open science, what is open access, what is open science, what it means to publish, to practice open science, and what the benefits are, I guess, the pros and cons of publishing in open science, and other topics like, evaluating science on an article level basis rather than, relying so much on the impact factor. These sort of topics related to publishing and what it means for a scientist's career.
Great, thank you. Giovanna, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and your motivation to pursue the career that you're in right now?
Okay, well, I didn't have a program like this one when I was going through grad school. And maybe in part that's one of the motivations why we decided to design this. I really waited until the very last minute to kind of think about what I wanted to do when I grow up. And it's not something I recommend to anybody. But I had a great PhD experience. I got a couple of papers out of it. My PI was a great mentor, but nearing the end of my PhD, I started to realize that I didn't have a driving question that kind of fueled me to, to seek answers. And I saw that this obsession with finding answers to certain questions was the one unifying theme that I saw among the postdocs and faculty members that I admired. So I kind of saw that academia perhaps was not the right fit for me. I love science, but I didn't have one driving question. And around that same time, please don't do the math, but it was around 2004. And so there were presidential elections, much like this year. And that time, there was a particular candidate that wasn't very supportive to science. And there were a lot of discussions about, the bias in science and whether, government was impinging on unbiased research priorities. I was finishing up a lot of experiments at the electrophysiology rig, and so I had NPR on like 24/7, and so I was like really thinking more than any time before about politics and science. And I heard from some friends who had done an internship at the National Academies about this program where scientists could learn what it meant to work in science policy, and it kind of gave you a view of what science policy was. And it was a short internship. If you're interested in science policy fellowships, I really recommend it. It's called the National Academies Christine Mirzayan Science and Technology Policy Graduate Fellowship. So long title. But it gives you kind of a taste for what science policy is. If you're interested in continuing, it gives you contacts at different agencies that you can then follow up for jobs or other fellowships. And if you decide to go back to academia, it's short enough that you can get a taste for it, and then maybe you can keep on being involved in science policy through your work as a scientist. So that's how I got in. I worked on a board that dealt with what we call workforce issues, like the environment of research in this country is funded by the taxpayers. And so the taxpayers expect something in return, and the system also prescribes a lot of how scientific training is, how funding is assigned. And so this whole view of science fascinated me, the view from kind of behind the curtain about how things work, how science gets funded, how researchers start their career. And so after this brief internship, I decided that I really wanted to keep on working behind the scenes to make sure that the scientific enterprise, the scientific workforce, was as healthy and as supported as possible, so that we could all have, make wonderful discoveries and help our society. Around the same time, I discovered Ciencia Puerto Rico, kind of by accident. I think I was Googling Science Puerto Rico one day, and I bumped into this page that Daniel Colon has started maybe a year ago before I found it. And so I had been thinking about how science affects society and how societies can support science and scientists. And I had been thinking about, wouldn't it be great if we had something similar in Puerto Rico, if we had, if we could maybe support science, the development of scientific research in Puerto Rico to the extent that it's supported here in the U.S. And so I kind of saw the two things kind of colliding at the same time. I found Ciencia Puerto Rico, I had found my calling in science policy, and I thought, well, maybe there's a way that I can contribute to Puerto Rico, even though I'm not back there. I'm gaining all this knowledge about how the science enterprise works. Maybe I can put it to work for the benefit of Puerto Rico at the same time while I'm building my career in this field. I worked for a number of years at the National Institutes of Health in a science policy office. We did a lot of the reports for Congress to tell them what type of, I was working in a neuroscience institute, so we had to tell them what advances had been done in the field of neuroscience and neurology, what the taxpayers' money had, in a sense, bought. We also did a lot of strategic planning and evaluation. So we took a look at the funding that the Institute had allocated, what diseases, what topics it had gone, what maybe there were certain diseases that had been underfunded that people were not really researching. Why is it that people weren't researching it? Is it that we needed to put more money, more targeted requests for proposals in those areas? Was it because that the training wasn't there? Maybe you needed to bring in physics or engineering to address a particular issue. So it was really a great opportunity to kind of think about how to move science forward. I worked at the NIH for about 4 years. Then I worked in an independent research institute, helping them kind of develop new research programs. So I worked, again, behind the scenes, but more of at a place where scientists work. And so I also learned a lot about, the kind of the money issues that institutions have to deal with when they're bringing in scientists, thinking about kind of where the next edge is going to be for cutting edge research. And all the while I had been volunteering for Ciencia Puerto Rico. A few years ago, we were able to fundraise enough through grants that I could quit my day job and take on my night job full time. And that was an amazing experience. And now we have this partnership with Yale University because we've really demonstrated the value that these types of communities can bring to the scientific workforce in general, and to helping increase the diversity of the workforce in particular. So that's kind of the not so brief story behind it, but happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. So I don't think Rudy is with us yet. Rudy, are you there?
No, I don't see him.
I don't see him in the list. Okay. So when he comes in, we'll just, we'll just take a pause so that he can tell us about his journey and the motivations to go into a non-academic career. So the next question that I want to ask our panelists is about what prepared you from your PhD. So, you all went through your PhD, you decided you didn't want to be in academia. And so what skills, what experiences for your PhD prepared you or did not prepare you to make the transition into the careers that you're in right now? And just for kicks, I'll start with you, Giovanna.
Well, I think one of the things that has served me really well in my current position is the ability to analyze problems and break down tasks. So, when you're designing your experiment, you're kind of, thinking about what you need to do to answer this question. You also think about, what are you have to think about the big picture, but then you also have to kind of break it down into objectives and goals. And that has been essential for the work of Ciencia Puerto Rico and for the programs that we've developed. I guess I would characterize my current position as program development and directing programs. And so, that has been essential to the work that I do, is being able to kind of break down a problem like, graduate students don't get professional development experiences in most of the graduate programs. How can we address that major problem? I don't think if I had a training that I have as a scientist, I would be able to kind of take those things and then break them down into solutions.
César. Oh, you're muted.
I think definitely, as Giovanna said, the ability to analyze and break down problems is actually central to what I do, and it's probably one of the strongest skills that I brought with me. But besides that, we're scientists. We like to talk about what we do, and this might sound stereotypical, but we're also Latino scientists, so we're pretty gregarious, and maybe we like to talk more than a lot of other people. So I think those two combined together really, really, really does help me a lot in my day-to-day. Because again, I have to be talking constantly in front of people gauging their interest in what we do, interacting with them, and just carrying on engaging conversations with them that are not only about the work that we do, but also about the work that they do and how can we solve some of the problems that they might be confronting with the tools that we have to offer. So the ability to be able to stand up there and talk confidently about something is definitely a skill that is very transferable from the PhD, from your PhD training. Also, the ability to be confronted with a problem and maybe switch on a dime if you need to. So you have a problem and this is tied to the ability to analyze and break down problems effectively. The ability to get some information, grasp that information very quickly, and on a dime be able to, explain it back to someone else in an easier, broken down way, is also something that we do very effectively. For example, when we have journal clubs, we're discussing someone else's work. It's related to what we do. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's a little bit outside of what we do. But in either case, we have the capability of looking at someone else's work, breaking down what they're doing, and be able to, regurgitate that to our fellow scientists in a very effective manner. And trust me when I tell you that we are very good at this, much, much better than anybody else probably in a marketing role. And I've experienced this, firsthand. Looking at, evaluating how other people present, and then I compared it to what I myself have done and what my colleague does, and the difference is very, 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 very clear in terms of how we are able to tackle that problem and how we are able to communicate effectively, way more effectively than other individuals. So I'd say that those two are very transferable skills when it comes to outreach, in my case.
Wonderful. So we have a question from Gabriel. Gabriel, do you want to go ahead and ask your question? Are you still asleep?
Yeah, you can't ask permission to go to sleep, so that's out of the question.
So, sure, I can ask that question. So, what struggles did you face during the transition from academia to non-academia job, and what would you have done different during this period?
Is it specific to me or to both of us?
To both, yeah.
Let me think about it for a second. Giovanna, you want to start?
I did everything perfect. I'm kidding. I wish. I think I had to kind of learn networking a la mala. It's not something that was really talked about when I was doing my PhD. I don't know if, maybe now you guys hear it a little bit more. But it really wasn't emphasized in my PhD program. And so I don't know if I would have done things differently, but I had to catch up quickly. Like I had to learn from friends, from seeing other people do it, kind of force myself to get out there, force myself to contact people and set up informational interviews, to kind of take cards and follow up with an email, to kind of mention who I knew in an email introduction to somebody. And you get better at it. So that's something that maybe I struggled with initially. It's also good. I think it was really good that I came in through a fellowship. In fact, I did more than one fellowship. I did the National Academies Fellowship, and then I did another fellowship that I don't know if it's still around, but it's the Department of Health and Human Services, which is the umbrella department under which NIH is in. Also the CDC, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, a number of other agencies sit under HHS. They used to have a fellowship program to kind of bring people to different agencies. The FDA is also under HHS. And so I did, after the National Academies, I did that fellowship. And those were, I think, really good if you can find those opportunities. They facilitate kind of a lot of things. They facilitate you seeing how you can apply your scientific knowledge to a new field, seeing how you can translate those skills, and not necessarily seeing how you can do it, but evidencing to others that you're a scientist and you have all these skills that can be applied and can be of value to your other positions. They also facilitate contacts. So at the National Academies, we met with people that worked at NIH, we met with people that worked on the Hill, and all those contacts, you follow up with them, and then you learn about opportunities, or they contact you, if, in the best of cases, and they tell you about opportunities. So it's a good way of getting a foot in the door, I would say. If you don't have access to a fellowship, then I would I would emphasize the networking, getting your name out there, getting people to know you, and maybe trying to do a project, maybe a volunteer project, maybe through your scientific society, maybe through a student organization, where you can also evidence how you have these additional skills that can be of value in a different setting.
Yeah, and I also can't emphasize the networking enough. It is kind of difficult for us to do it at the beginning, particularly when we're transitioning out of academia. I mean, we're in our labs most of the time. However, we do know how to network, and we do it, I think, more often than we think. If we think about the times that we go to scientific conferences, that is networking. Except that maybe if you don't want to be in academia, perhaps you should network with the other people that are at the conference, meaning the vendors. Maybe you don't want to be in sales, but you find a company, you like the work that they do, get people's cards and then establish a connection there. Send them an email. It takes you 30 minutes to compose that email and tell them, I really like the work that your company do. Maybe we can, and I'm thinking of transitioning outside of academia. Maybe we can sit down for a coffee, or maybe we can sit down for a 30-minute chat afterwards. And most of the time, people will answer and they'll say yes. And that's a way in. So even if that person doesn't work directly in the area that you're interested in, they might be able to help you identify a person that does. And that happened to me multiple times. So that's a way to take advantage of networking at scientific conferences, besides networking with other academics. If not, there are multiple departments within the university that you can volunteer in, and I'm pretty sure they would love your help. Let's say, for example, fundraising might be a strong area at your institute. So try to find the fundraising office and see if they need any help, maybe with paperwork, maybe with the writing of grants for raising funds. There might be foundations near where you are that might want your help and your writing skills, because you do have some very strong writing and communication skills, and you also bring a different perspective probably to the organization, being from a minority background. So that, I would say, that's also a plus and a very important I think card that you have in your deck that you could use. In terms of what I would have done differently, maybe network a little bit earlier than I did, and try to establish networks of like-minded people like myself, like-minded people like yourself, people in your university that share common goals and common outlooks in life, and get the ball rolling, really. If there's a particular field that you're interested in, maybe together you can start a mini symposium and invite people from, industries, people from companies that you are interested in, to come and speak. And that way, not only do you start growing your network, but you're also demonstrating your leadership abilities and your ability to to put these events together, so that eventually, if you do apply for a job at one of their companies, they will remember you. So I would say there's just some strategies that you could definitely use to your advantage. Yeah.
Thank you. So yes, definitely networking. I will echo that, especially because when you're like some of these non-research, non-academic careers, they're somewhat well established. So maybe there are fellowships, or there are programs, internships that you can do to kind of break into the field. But I would say for the most part, you have to find your own way into this career. So really networking is key. I mean, networking is key in any career path, but I would say that when you're making that leap to a non-academic career, it's even more important that you have a strong network. So I have to underscore what both of you have said. Never underestimate the value of networking and of your network. So Carlos, you have two questions. You want to ask the first one, and then we can move on to the second one? Oh, you can't. Okay, I'll ask the question for you. So Carlos' question is about how you can grow and the positions that you're in. So is there possibilities for you to get promoted, or what other opportunities to grow professionally, or to get a higher job title are there in your respective careers?
Right. So that's a bit of a tricky question for me, because the position was pretty much created, out of thin air. There wasn't any position in outreach at the company when I started. I mean, there was another person that was doing outreach, but there wasn't like a lower outreach and then outreach as I do it. So I'm actually the outreach director. So there's really not another position above that. After we got hired, we did hire some people that were outreach coordinators, and those, I guess, then if you get into the company that way, then you help out with the outreach. I don't know, writing emails, sending emails, and keeping track of that sort of stuff. And then maybe you can step up to a director role, to basically like oversee the outreach activities in your territory. But besides that, you can, I guess, move laterally within the company and do something different within marketing, maybe some program management, maybe a program management position, or product management position, I should say. So I guess translating, which means pretty much translating the suggestions from your users to your programmers and developers, so that they can develop whatever it is that the users want. So there are a few, I guess, lateral moves that you could do. In my case, there's really not a higher position, at least in my company.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, my path, I'm creating as I go. But I can tell you about, for example, science policy positions in the government. There are a number of steps that you can go to. The government is really good in terms of having like very defined pay grades and steps that the more time, experience, and accomplishments you get, the more the higher salary you get. It might also come with a few more responsibilities or more interesting, challenging roles. But for the most part, the responsibilities kind of stay the same. So in terms of personal growth, at least, for example, as a health science science policy analyst, which is what I was at the NIH. I could see myself getting from maybe a GS13 to a GS15 in maybe 5-8 years, and then kind of staying at that level, maybe even being a director of a science policy office at the NIH, and then staying there. Personally, I kind of saw the work as really exciting, and there was a learning curve, and I really like learning curves. That's kind of what fuels me. But then I saw that it would probably plateau after about 5 years. Like I saw that after about 5 years, you kind of really know what your work is. You've done kind of all of it, and there's not that much learning going on anymore. But what I did see was a lot of people making lateral moves, like Cesar mentioned. So, for example, from being a health science policy analyst, some people moved into a program director position, or some people moved into review, or some people moved from the government to a nonprofit organization. I pulled up the LinkedIn of a colleague of mine that kind of started in the same fellowship at the National Academies a couple of years before me, and I've kind of kept track of where she's been, and she's a really great example of the kind of the hopping that happens in this line of work. So she was she worked first as kind of an associate in the science policy office at FASIB. Then she worked as director of science policy at FASIB. Then she went to be director of science policy at the American Association for Cancer Research. And now she's the director of a science policy shop at the NIH. So you can kind of see that, you know, a lot of people move around from one position to the other, or within the government. In terms of positions within academia that are not research positions, I think I could probably maybe get into directing a diversity office or a training program at the university. Some people I've also seen go back to academia to have faculty positions in science policy. I've seen that quite a bit. So people kind of move around. But I think I haven't seen a lot of people out of work, so that's a positive.
Thank you. So if I actually may add to that, you can see that people that are going outside of academia, although Giovanna and Cesar, they're not in the technical or pure sense of the word entrepreneurs, because they're not creating their own companies, they do have a very entrepreneurial spirit. They've gone out, they said, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm passionate about, and they found opportunities to land in a place where they can create their own thing, or through their network they have created their own thing. And I think that entrepreneurial mindset is something that a lot of scientists have. Maybe we don't realize it and it's not obvious, but that desire or that motivation to pursue new things, to be creative, to do our own thing is something that as graduate students, when you're in academia, that's something that it's integral to the job that you're doing, to the role that you have. And so that is something else that you can translate, that need to create, to do new things, to be entrepreneurial, to then transition outside of academia. All right.
Yes, just before we continue,
yes.
To add to what you added, if you are confused, or you're shy about this idea of being entrepreneurial, check out your school's business school, if they have a business school, or any entrepreneurial resources or courses that they might have at the university. I think it's an excellent idea to be part of this course, maybe be part of some sort of entrepreneurship competition. It really does help in changing the way that you see yourself, the way that you market yourself, the way that you know, it also changes your perspective on what you have to offer, as well. So, you know, it's just a really nice way, a really nice resource that you should use to your advantage. I myself took a course at the New York Academy of Sciences. The course was called Idea to IPO, and it was a course that lasted 10 weeks, and during those 10 weeks you pretty much went through the whole process of taking an idea, building a company around it, and then sort of marketing that company afterwards. But if you don't have something like that at your university, I'm sure that you might have smaller courses that you could take.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion, César. All right, so the next question, also from Carlos, is about the usual career path of somebody in your position. Either one of you want to I mean, I think from what we've seen so far, there's really no career path or usual traditional career path to some of these non-academic jobs. But, were there particular steps that other people in your field have taken?
Yeah, I kind of talked about that a little bit before. The path in science policy, I think the way I've seen my colleagues is that, you can work in government, you can work in nonprofits, either, like professional societies or disease-focused patient advocacy groups. You can work maybe in funding foundations that provide funding. And I've seen, quite a bit of hopping around is kind of the path that I've seen until people find maybe the position that they really like, or they get to a stage where they're, content in having a more stable job. So, yeah.
I would say that outreach in my case, and if you look at other people that are sort of follow my career path, they started with, I guess, the very basics. Get involved with your student union, your graduate student union, your postdoc student union, or whatever you have at your disposal in your university, and use that as your first step in doing outreach. Once you're doing that, then volunteer is the next. I would say volunteering is the next step. Just to get an idea of what is out there, and it doesn't even need to be within science. It can be something completely different, but something that really does showcase your interest in doing outreach and communicating your science with other people, or just stepping outside of the walls of your lab.
Great. So Rudy has joined us. So Rudy, why don't you say hi?
Hi, everybody. And if I'm sweaty, it's because I literally had to run away from people to make it here. My sincere apologies for being crazy late. I feel awful.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. Stuff happens. So we've been having a really great conversation so far about transferable skills. Everybody has talked a little bit about their journey into the non-academic career, non-research career that they're in right now, and their motivation to make that leap. We have also talked about some of the steps that people have taken, strategies to make that transition. So why don't you share with us, because I don't want to pack all of that in one question. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and what motivated you to make the leap from academia?
Right. And so because this is like a small audience of friends, I will try to be as transparent as humanly possible.
Okay, we are recording this and we will post this online. So FYI.
That's fine. All right, so maybe I'll curse a little less, but basically, right. So the truth is that okay. So the background is that I went to Rockefeller for my PhD in neuroscience, then left and was at McKinsey doing consulting for 2.5 years, and then left to start a company focused on helping PhDs after that. Now, what precipitated the change between grad school and McKinsey was exactly the opposite of what I sort of like have tried to build a company around, which is it had no thought outside of just like being depressed and sad with my crappy science. And that in conjunction with being a really poor bastard for an entire life. And then like for me personally, like there was this girl that I'd met, she was also a grad student. I wanted to marry her, but I was so in debt and I was like terrible with money. So I was just like, this is like never going to happen. And so in that mental space where I felt like a failure in lab and I was broke and like just tired of being that way, a friend suggested that I apply to this company called McKinsey & Company. And I applied. I thought they were a law firm. It was not at all thoughtful. And as I went through the process, I kind of learned and figured out what they did. So that is how impoverished I was at thinking about careers and the next step. So when they literally offered me a job, it was the only consulting firm I applied to, because by the time I learned what consulting was, I'd missed all the other deadlines. And by like sheer luck and like force of personality in some cases, like I got through the process. And when I got an offer, like I honestly felt that was the only thing I could do but to take that job, which is really silly. So while I was there, because of how I had felt, I honestly thought that McKinsey had like saved me. Saved me from having to look for another job, saved me from poverty, saved me from like having to get a postdoc, because by then I honestly was totally burnt out on the science. And so I started helping recruit PhDs to McKinsey, and I co-led the effort for the Northeast practice. And so I've interviewed lots and lots of candidates in that process. And so between that and building a company that helps PhDs get jobs, I would say that if there is one thing that I could pass on in terms of like what you should do, is to hack your experience to be as close to whatever you want to actually get. Let me dimensionalize that. So, I guess, do you go by César or César? César? So what he said is effectively that. He said, do you want to do outreach? Then why don't you can't be an outreach officer yet, but what you can do is you can do outreach related activities that will differentiate you and move you closer to doing that. And what I found, for example, at McKinsey, is that the consultants we hired were often people that had done consulting on the side. Not because we think that they're now credible as consultants, but because it shows interest, it shows leadership, it shows like an ability to go out and actually do something that's related to what you want. And that has been no different whenever we've placed people at companies. In this case, like, we've worked with over 45 companies, and very rarely, because of what we're trying to do we try to get experienced hires. We're literally trying to get like grad students and postdocs jobs. And the number one predictor for us as to whether or not a person will get an insight interview is whether or not they have done an experience that approximates the experience they're going to get there. So maybe they didn't work in industry, but they collaborated with industry, things like that. It ends up being just a huge predictor for us, and is like the one thing that if I had been more thoughtful about my own job search, that I would have thought about and done myself.
Great. So something that we talked about before you joined was that many times when you're in a non-academic career, or you are jumping into a research career, you have to be very entrepreneurial. Many people have to create their own things. So you're the actual entrepreneur in-house. So can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to create Oyster, and how was that process of creating your own company?
Yeah. Starting your own company is the worst decision you could make. It is.
You're such a Debbie Downer.
No, it's just like so incredibly hard. Like it's just a pain in the ass all the time. it's really hard. But I will continue to, like, even if Oyster fails, I will continue to build another company and then another company. I'll just keep doing it because I think like the one thing that led me to be a PhD was that I really like to do things at a deep level, and I am driven by ideas. And often, like when you're starting a company, it's all just an idea, right? It's just like, oh, I want to build a pharmaceutical product to like tackle this space that I really love, or like I want to solve this one issue for bioinformatics over here, or whatever. Or maybe it's like a nonprofit to like address like the shitty professional development in grad school or something. The point is that in any case, like that, being able to do that throughout my career is something that I want to do, so I'll continue to do it. But what led me to do it was that I didn't know any better. I just thought like, oh, like how hard could it be? So I'll just get some friends and we'll just do it. And then it just proved to be the hardest fucking thing in the world. So yeah, that's not a great answer, but I think what it, like the tactical like advice that comes from that is, it's not dissimilar from the advice that I give to people that are thinking, like, are say balancing an offer from like a McKinsey BCG and let's say a smaller consulting firm like PricewaterhouseCoopers in terms of lifestyle pay, et cetera. Is like, if you are a single person and you don't have anyone that like needs your time, you don't have a pet that you really love and want to like see 3 times a day, then, and you're really passionate about something, then you can and maybe should start your own thing. But if you have a significant other, if you have kids, if you're broke, if you're like these things, then I think you need to have a fair conversation with people. Because though you might love it, like the biggest impact for me in terms of like slowing my ability to like build this company or any future company is that like, I really love my wife, I really love my kids, and the company like is relentless. Like they just want so much of me. So yeah, I don't know. That was a ramble answer, but I hope that was helpful. Also, I think Laura should maybe like unmute her thing because it seems to be whatever's happening there is awesome.
I am muted. Sorry, I was muted. Let's see, Ivelisse, you had a question, and I think it's a very valid concern. Do you want to go ahead and share with us?
Giovanna kind of answered the question, but I was just noticing that when you move away from academia, it sounds kind of risky because you're not having a specific position like, oh, so now I'm going to move and do this, and then I'm going to move and do that and have a plan, but you kind of move around. So I was just wondering if at some point you felt unstable in terms of a job, and how did you go around that? Or do you just stay in the same job until you find a way to get to the path you really want to go, and then you move that to that area? How do you do?
Yeah, and another thing that Ivelisse also asked on the chat was that it seemed like there was a lot of networking involved in getting the type of positions that Rudy, Cesar, and I have. And, you know, whether that adds another risk component to making this transition. So first of all, yes, I mean, I think you have, like Rudy says, if you're interested in these positions where there's not kind of those worn grooves of you next do this and you next do that, then like he says, like Rudy says, you have to be kind of a hustler. You know, you have to be kind of look for opportunities, talk to people, see where your in might be, you know, have somebody recommend you, those type of things. And that's kind of how a lot of people get their foot in the door. Once you get the foot in the door, though, I think the risk, you know, drops down significantly. Once you get the foot in the door and you can demonstrate how your skills are very transferable, and how you can be successful in another setting outside of the lab, then the fact that you have a PhD, that you know the scientific environment, at least for science policy, makes you super valuable. And so then, the risk goes way down. In terms of the networking and the hustling, I would say that academia, you also need to hustle and you need to network a lot to get an academic position these days. It might be different, you might not be doing informational interviews with people because you already know what it's like, to be a faculty member, but you might not really know what it takes to get a position in academia, or what are the little things that people never talk about that help you get a position in academia. And so you do need to talk to people, seek advice, particularly the people right above you. So if you're, looking for a postdoc, talk to recent postdocs, ask them how they did it, get kind of their sense. There's a lot of unspoken elements in academic science that also make a big difference and can increase or decrease your risk of getting a position in academia. So in that sense, I don't see it as being that different. Every transition, there's always an element of risk, and every transition also has an element of hustling for us in science.
Yeah, I would say that at least in my case, I tended to be more, what do they call this, reactive rather than proactive. If we think about our, the way that we've been trained as scientists, right? A lot of the stuff comes to us, right? We are in a lab, we're doing our experiments. Oh, I have to go to the seminar, or oh, there's a seminar that they're doing today on, I don't know, on alternative careers or whatnot. So a lot of the times, those, I guess, resources come to you rather than
cutting out. Sorry.
Oh. So a lot of the time, the resources are coming to you rather than you going to them. So I think if you want to make that switch, you have to switch the equation around, right? And you have to be the person that goes out there and becomes more proactive rather than reactive. In terms of risk, yeah, there's risk. There's no doubt about it. But it's a calculated risk, I would say. Like we've been saying, if you want to be like, if you have a position here that that you want, and you're over here, try to figure out the little steps in between to get there and try to achieve them little by little. If it's outreach, again, you just try to do some outreach related activities close to your university, just to demonstrate that, that you have the true interest in that particular field. If it's consulting, start a consulting club and do some consulting on the side. A lot of universities have these. Because there's a lot of students that want to end up in places like McKinsey, and having that experience actually does help a lot. Fundraising and whatnot, the same thing. So again, there is a risk, but it's not an unmitigated risk. It's a calculated risk that you take.
Rudy, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think Ivelisse, the only thing that I would add to that is that if some of the worry that you have comes from the fact that like this is a pretty stressful kind of shitty time to be thinking about getting a job, and you're like, do I have to keep repeating this like every year and a half? Like, I don't know if I can stand that. Just know that you are as unemployable as you will ever be. Like, this is as bad as it gets. As soon as you get a job, you become massively more employable. For the simple reason that, so if you take that, like this thing that, César and that we've been discussing is like of hacking like some approximate version of that experience. But once you have that actual job, then you've done it. And being able to get that job again and again at some better place becomes easier and easier. In fact, the number one path that we see for PhDs that are making dramatic shifts is where they go to a tiny company to do something that a big company would never let them do. So like a lot of people are like, oh, I want to do business development. Well, Pfizer's never going to let like some snotty-nosed like postdoc come in and like do business development for them, because they can get somebody who's got 5 years of credible business experience and contacts and a Rolodex to rely on to do business development for them. But some rink-a-dink startup in Connecticut will, because they can't get that legit person, right? But once you come into that small place and now you've done real business development for a year, then your ability to go to a Merck or Eli Lilly to say like, hey, I want to be an associate in your business development unit becomes very, very credible. So just know that like this is literally as bad as it gets, and after this, it becomes massively easier.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, if you look at the unemployment levels for people that have PhDs in sciences, they're pretty low. And also, I think it's a different kind of risk. If you think about academia versus all of the other non-academic careers, right now, the chances that you'll get a faculty position are really low, because there's just not that many. So, that going into academia is also risky, but it's a different kind of risk because there's less of a defined path. You want an academic position, you go to grad school, you do a postdoc, then maybe you do a second postdoc, and then you apply for faculty positions. Whereas for these non-academic paths, some of them have more of a defined way to go, but for the most part, you have to find your own way. And that is really, really scary. But also, I think you have to think about, what do you value? Do you want to work in a place that has a lot of structure and that your role is very, very defined? Or do you want to go into a position in which you have more creative freedom that, yes, it's a small organization, you're not going to get paid as much, but you can do whatever you want. Like, you can create your own programs, you can do your own thing, you can do you. So it's also important to think about, what is it that you really value? What is it that really drives you in making that decision and assessing, as Cesar said, that making that calculated risk of, do I want to go down this way or not? So I want to ask, and I think this is something that probably all of us, the panel and myself included, we've had to do, but it's a really rough move, a rough transition to make, and how to market. Like, we've told you many, many times already, and in many different ways, that you do have transferable skills. But I think one of the big challenges for PhDs is how to market those skills. I think it's really difficult because in academia, you're used to using a CV, you're not used to having a resume. And so how do you go about marketing both the skills that you've earned during your PhD and maybe in other experiences, extracurricular experiences? Like, how do you frame those so that you can make that jump into a non-academic career? Rudy, I'll have you start since you're the expert in helping PhDs get non-academic jobs.
Yeah. So first I should say that, so I've known Monica for a very long time, since we were like sophomores in college or something. And we've been friends just a really, really long time. And the result of that is that I have seen her go from like this like really excited undergrad in science to like having a hard time during like her grad years in the middle there at Harvard to like now having her dream job. And she, to me, is a very inspirational human, because when she said what she just did about how, like, can you find a job that lets you do you? Like, I actually think she's done that. And it all started from her like hacking that experience. Like, she was doing Ciencia PR, like getting me to like download science papers from the Rockefeller Library to like send around to like other Puerto Rican scientists. So like, she's been doing that for a really long time. But she's very unique that way. The reality is that most PhDs, their stories aren't that calculated. Like, you might be, like, you started your PhD and you're like, oh, I really want to do epigenetics and like mouse plus like behavior or something. So you're doing that. But the job market doesn't typically work that way. What we see is that PhDs like just get the job that they get, and they like take the first job that they land in. That's it. And the result of that is nothing, like bad. They are happy, they make money, they get a career, then they eventually figure out what they want to do and they switch. Lots of friends of mine have started as like science communication people at large pharmaceutical companies. Some of them are MSLs, some of them are now directors within that unit. Others like went back into R&D. There's a lot of change. The purpose of saying that is like, we should not put so much pressure on ourselves to be so PhD and calculated up front about the jobs we're going to take. This is just like the next step. You're all incredibly smart people. We're all going to get a job. I don't know what that job will be, and that job might not be your dream job. So what? The nice thing is, like, this isn't tenure. You're not locked in. Like, this isn't the only job you're going to get. Like, so my typical advice whenever I am helping a friend or a PhD who has a job offer, but they're like, oh, but it's not really what I want to do. Should I wait 6 more months to get this other thing? I'm like, no, just take that job. Just take the job. And the point of that isn't that you don't need to now figure out, like, who do I want to become? Who cares? You don't know. You're in a PhD, and you're thinking about leaving. Like, you clearly don't know who the hell you want to be. Fine. Not a big deal. I was like a consultant thinking I would do that for a while. And then I realized, like, I didn't like it enough. And then I started my own company. And sometimes I think that I should have done something else. Like, who knows? The point is that, like, the advice that you've heard is so good. Network the shit out of your network. Like, you should just talk to everyone. In fact, one of the biggest issues that we see with, like, our approach to our site is that, like, my co-founder and I, we looked at each other and we're like, we would not get a job this way anymore. Like, we wouldn't look at job boards anymore. Like, the way I'm going to get my next job is I'm just going to talk to friends and somebody's going to offer me a job. That's how I'm going to get my next job. And that's the way my co-founder, Zach, also coming out of McKinsey, that's the way he's going to get his own job. And that's just because we've just built, like, friends. Like, you now know multiple human beings that are doing things. The likelihood that I would hire one of you is 100x versus some other person. If Ciencia PR expands, you guys know the person who's, like, effectively running the show on the ground. Like, it's so much easier, right? So yeah, that doesn't necessarily answer the question, because in some cases, like, I think that it might be the wrong question. I think that we need to just step back and understand that we're just undergoing, like, a tiny transition. You're going to be a professional for another, like, 40 to 60 years. Like, your next job is, like, so meaningless relative to, like, who you'll be 25 years from now. That is just about, like, getting a job that's, like, in the area that you might care about. And even if you mess that up, you can switch a year or two later.
Giovanna, César?
You repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question is about how you market your skills, or how you frame your skills to make that transition into a non-academic or non-research career.
I think it depends on the position that you're applying to. You're going to have to take a close look. Well, first of all, you have to network, and don't just go, blindly applying to any job posts that you see, and not doing anything besides just applying, because that you're not really going to get a job that way. I think one of the articles that Monica shared with you guys as background reading said that, like, the success rate for that type of blindly applying to job posts without any other contact is like 2%. First of all, do your research, talk to somebody within the company that you're interested in, make some contacts, and kind of get somebody in there, if you can, to take a look at your CV. That, I think, is one of the, it positions you better to apply if you have somebody on the inside kind of bringing up your CV to the hiring managers. The other thing is take a look at the job description and look for the keywords. And they'll differ depending on the position. But most of those keywords you can probably integrate into your resume, into your CV, into your letter, your cover letter, which you should have. You should have a cover letter. And in that cover letter, make it explicit how your experience relates to the job position. So, for example, if the job position, let's see if I'm creative enough here on the spot. If the job position is for regulatory manager for a company, you're going to be writing IRB proposals for the company. Then, highlight any type of IRB research experience you might have had, highlight your skills in technical writing and in organizing information. Your experience, your publications will be very important for that. I'm sure Rudy has a lot of more great examples like this, but you're gonna have to, like he says, to use his terminology, hack your cover letter and your CV so that it's not really making up stuff. It's just making it evident to them in their language how your skills relate to that position. If you use the scientific language, the academic language, they're not going to realize it. And in fact, a lot of companies have systems where they just screen for the keywords to pull out kind of the most relevant applicants and to screen out applicants that don't have anything to do with that. So keywords, cover letter, getting informed about the position with people, networking, those are kind of all the ways to help make your experience relevant to the position.
Yeah, I think definitely trying to match your CV, your resume to the job description is super important. So the thing about networking is not only that it's a great opportunity to meet people in companies that you want to be part of. It's also a great way to learn how to market yourself, right? Because you're talking to these people, you're asking them what they do on a day-to-day basis, and most of the time they're going to give you, their 30-second elevator pitch. And that's a great opportunity. Those are great opportunities for you to learn about how to market yourself when the time comes to, to have an interview with someone at a company. So, yeah, again, networking is critical, not only to meet other people, but also to help you in that process.
Awesome. So if it wasn't said enough, network. Ibelis, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I was just going to ask, what if you have a leadership position in an area that is not related to science at all? How do you put that in perspective so that people will see that counts as leadership, that counts as communicating to people, and that you indeed have to explain them what you do in science and, in a more diluted way, let's say, and that still counts. But how do you put that on your resume? Like, it's kind of hard, I think, if it's not related to science or education.
So we work a lot with PhDs to work on their resumes. And let's differentiate between a CV and a resume, right? So the CV, the curriculum vitae, literally means your life story. That's the translation. And so it's just like a laundry list of all the things you've done. So it might include all the abstracts, all the publications, all the posters listed, every meeting you've ever gone to, every SACNAS year after year, etc. The resume instead is like a narrative pulled from those experiences that tells an employer why you are a fit for them. So it might not mention posters at all. It might be just like, published 3 papers in high impact journals, parentheses, like name, close parentheses, 12 poster sessions, 3 invited talks, period. That might be all that gets mentioned, right? So when we think about leadership, which we think of as being really, really important, as I mentioned, it's like one of the better predictors for people being able to get insight interviews for us, is that it depends on the job. So if you're applying to a consulting firm, then basically the way your resume is structured is you're going to have education, then leadership, because like you're not going to really talk about your research. Who cares if you worked on like molecule X or Y, right? And you're like, it would literally say leadership. Next line, let's say that you're at Yale. Then it'll say like PhD student, comma, Yale. Underneath that first bullet, like, led the development of a novel therapeutic in the immunology space, period. Or like comma, like resulting in like $2 million grants, parentheses, like in proposal, blah, 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 right? And then further down, like your next experience might be, let's say that you're like the director. So Ivelisse, what experience are you thinking of? Just so I can like give it actual voice.
Sports.
Awesome.
I teach Taekwondo to kids. That's why I asked.
Right. Okay. So it depends, right? So that experience can either be, it would literally be like instructor, comma, Taekwondo. And then underneath it would be, like leads, like group of like 25 children, parentheses, like ages 3 through 12, parentheses, on a bi-weekly, blah, 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 resulting in like an increase in the business, like in the group size by 20% or something, like something that shows that you've done something. Now, if it's just like that you've done it, but there isn't significant leadership in it, like let's say, like I used to work at McDonald's, like there was no real leadership. I was just like, I just washed dishes well. Then like that experience can move to the About Me section, which is at the bottom. You should totally have an About Me section. And there it would just say like instead of just saying sports, because it could totally just say sports. Like, in fact, for you, it's Taekwondo. And better than that, you're a person that actually teaches Taekwondo. And you've done that, let's say, for 4 years. So you'd literally say like Taekwondo instructor, parentheses, 4 years. And in that way, well, like what I see in your resume is a person that at everything that she does, she kicks ass. And even the things outside of lab or outside of anything else, like she does to a really great level, right? Those are really, like really, really strong resumes. That's the way that I would, like if I was working to write your resume, how I would think about that. Is that helpful?
Yes, she's nodding yes, in case you can't see her. All right, do we have any other questions from the fellows? You've been quiet today. All right, well, you think about that. I think what Rudy just said, it's a really great example of how you can frame any experience that you have into something that can be really, really valuable for your resume, or, for in case of a networking experience. I think that that was a really great example. You may think that if you're teaching sport, or if you are, I don't know, doing art, that's something that's not necessarily valuable. But if you can show skills that are really, really relevant for that position that you want to get next, then it's about being creative. It's not about lying, because sometimes people feel like, well, if that's not exactly what I did, that's a lie. Well, no, it's not a lie, but it's really about being creative with how you frame things. It's also about understanding how employers are thinking. You really have to, and we've talked about this before in the context of knowing your audience and being an effective communicator. You have to know who you're talking to. And then, your resume, as Rudy mentioned, is a story. It's a narrative that is going to get your foot at the door. Basically, it's a narrative that somebody is going to say, oh, yeah, we want to talk to this person. We want to know more. So it's really about thinking, how are the skills, how can you frame those skills that you're gaining in graduate school, in whatever science or non-science related activity that you're doing? How can you frame that so that you can show your value to the company, the organization, or the group that you're trying to move towards to? Carlos has a follow-up question to that. And it's like, when is it too much? Like, when do you know, or how do you know that you're being too creative with how you're framing your skills, I guess? Is there a limit on how creative you can be with how you're framing your skills on your resume?
I mean, I would say that the first thing you got to do is make an honest assessment of your skills, and and just write them down. Write the skills that you have. Write them down. Ask someone that you trust to evaluate those skills and give you honest feedback. To see whether or not you're being truthful to yourself. Obviously, if you don't know any coding language, you're not gonna apply for a position as a software engineer, because it's not gonna fly. But for other positions, that might use some of your transferable skills, I think you can be very creative. But it always starts with an honest assessment of your skills, writing them down, getting some feedback from people to tell you, you know what, you're really bullshitting yourself here. you tone it down a bit. And that always helps. That helped me, and it's helped pretty much most of the people that I've known that have made the transition outside of academia.
Giovanna, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, not really. I mean, I think Cesar said it best, and you obviously don't want to put something in writing that then you'd be embarrassed about if somebody actually asks you to do something that you don't know how to do, or that you'd be ashamed if somebody found out. But at the same time, sometimes we don't really appreciate the skills we have. So one piece of advice might be to take your CV, your resume, and give it to somebody that maybe you've met in an informational interview, or maybe a colleague that is also exploring a similar career, and talk about it with them. I think it helps a lot sometimes to get that outside perspective, particularly for some of us who tend to be more like humble and I don't really think I could do that. And then, you have done that. Maybe you're not realizing you have. So get that second set of eyes to kind of take a look at it and help you refine it, and help you tailor it to the position that you're applying for.
Great. So we have a couple of questions, but in the interest of time, I am going to ask them for you guys. So I'm going to actually combine two questions from Naisha and Omar. And I think this is more directed towards you, Rudy, about how you start a business, or how do you become self-employed? And do you need to have MBA or business studies for that?
So the very brief on this is that, so I missed the conversation about transferable skills. I have, I think, developed a perspective that kind of runs counter to what people in the PhD space kind of think. And my personal perspective is that PhDs effectively have negligible transferable skills, but they're transferable people. We can get into that, but it's not different from the question you've asked. Because what you're saying is like, I'm a PhD, can I really run a business? And I wanted to start my own business out of grad school, but I thought like, well, of course I can't. So when a business opportunity came along, I thought like, oh, well, I'll go to McKinsey and then I'll know about business. But then when I started my company, the truth is like I sucked and I needed to start from scratch. And I think it's because what you're effectively saying to me is like, Rudy, say as an MBA or as at McKinsey or as like some business person, you're a volleyball player. And now I want to go and be a soccer player. Like, is that a good move? Should I do volleyball before I play soccer? And the reality is like, no, if you want to be a soccer player, you should just play soccer. So from that perspective, like given that like 2.5 years at McKinsey they taught me certain things that were really valuable for starting my own business. But I could have learned those things by just, like I didn't need 2.5 years to do that. So my advice to you is if you're interested, don't think that you will suck at this, right? Like Steve Jobs didn't have an MBA, like, Bill Gates didn't have an MBA. The founders of Regeneron didn't have like MBAs. Like, so you're going to be okay. My advice to you is to just do the thing you want to do if you know what that is.
Yeah, I mean, not to sound cheesy, but like Nike says, just do it. I think that's where you have to start. You have to, if you have an idea for something, just get the ball rolling and start doing it. Otherwise, you're not gonna get anywhere. Like Rudy says, don't get into $200,000 in debt and get an MBA and think that's going to help you start a business, because now you probably won't have a job afterwards and you'll be $200,000 in debt. So the answer is no. So if you are going to get yourself in debt, maybe get yourself in debt if you're starting your business. Not that this is necessarily sound business advice, but I would say it's better than getting a degree that might not prove to be useful.
Yeah. And, to kind of bring back what we've said, I mean, I don't have my own business, but my impression is that instead of an MBA, there obviously has to be a passion to start your own business and to, to solve a problem. I've heard that entrepreneurs, they want to solve a problem that they see and they just can't sleep because like that's the driving force. They see a problem, they want to solve it. But, instead of an MBA, probably the best thing that you can do is actually tap into your network, talk to people that have started a business, that have the contacts of like, where do you get your funding if you want to start a business? That's probably the best way to go, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. I mean, Monica is being too humble because she and I are both entrepreneurs, I think, in the nonprofit world. So we've kind of also created our own thing and our own organization. But you guys are in the best position possible. You're at universities. Your universities probably have MBA schools. So if you're interested in entrepreneurship, don't wait to get your PhD and then, like Cesar said, get into debt to get into an MBA program. Just start taking the classes. There's usually also competitions where MBA students are looking for people to partner to get the creative ideas from. And that's the best way. That's the best way of learning, about how to start a business is by, tapping into those resources that are already there at your university. Especially, also, I think somebody was asking about being self-employed and consulting. I think taking some classes while you're still in grad school at the MBA school can also help you with that. Maybe Rudy, since you've done consulting, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. In the -1 minute that we have left, about how to, kind of leverage the resources that they already have in graduate school to get into, if they're interested in consulting or in being self-employed and having some type of, self business.
Yeah, so I've met 2 PhD students that have started like miniature consulting firms, basically just like doing it themselves. And it's really simple. They're basically experts at a thing that they know companies might need or they believe that they might need. And so they created a dummy website using Wix.com and then sent around emails to companies that they thought might need their services. And for and they just said like, we charge a $5,000 flat fee. So why not? And some companies bit, and then they started doing side work. In both of those cases, it was technically illegal because of like the way stipends work or whatever. But I mean, whatever. Sorry, the Chinese hackers plus government that's seeing this video definitely don't do that. But I did think that was wiry. So that's it. But what I would say is that, consulting is a really great avenue for many of us because we don't really know what we want to do. We just want to like open up our opportunity space. And the easiest thing that you can do, what I recommend to everyone, is to not think about what a consulting company would want to see in terms of like, well, I guess I should do consulting. But if that's not what you're passionate about, then don't do that, right? Like I was really interested in outreach. So I started a summer neuroscience program for poor brown kids in New York City. And that's what I did. And when because I was passionate about it, so I thought about it, I really wanted to do it. I spent a lot of time on it. So it was really easy for me to do that. Versus if I had also then joined the consulting club, then I would have been doing the consulting club on Wednesdays. But then the rest of the week I'd have been doing my diversity thing. My proposal to you is to just do whatever that thing is that you like to do already. It can literally be hiking. So just start a hiking club and just start going hiking. Get a budget of $2,000 from your university and schedule like a big trip to Colorado or something. And then ba-boom, that's a significant leadership experience. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. So with that, we'll end because we're a little over time. So thank you very much, Rudy, Cesar, and Giovanna for the real talk and for sharing your experiences and your wisdom. Thank you, everybody, for the fellows for the questions and the comments. And we'll see you next time. All right, and we're done recording.
Bye, everybody. And connect with me on LinkedIn. Say hi. I'm happy to be of help, however.
Thank you, Rudy.
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn too as well, if you want.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Nos vemos.